I often say on this channel that all the answers are within you. I also often say that your intuition is your true compass, to always follow your own intuition, for it is always guiding you to your soul's freedom. But what if we could put a very real illustration to this internal storehouse, this limitless storehouse of knowledge we have, not only about ourself, our soul's destiny, and what will lead us into that destiny, but also about everything that has ever existed or ever will exist in the universe. Today we're going to be talking about an illustration some have used to exemplify that storehouse within us, the Akashic Records. If you've heard anything about the Akashic Records, you may have envisioned them as they are often illustrated as a gigantic library full of shelves and shelves of books filled with knowledge of anything you could ever imagine, any question you could ever ask. The answer to that question is stored within one of these books. The question is, how do we access this metaphorical library, this limitless storehouse of information? How do we open the doorway to this library? And not just that, but how do we find the right so-called book within the Akashic Records? The book, and not just the book, but the right page in that book, the piece of information we need to heal something in our lives, to understand something about ourselves or the world, or even our life purpose and calling. All of this kind of information is stored in the Akashic Records, and today I am going to be teaching you how you can begin accessing the Akashic Records right now. Yes, even in this very moment, using meditation, because meditation is the tool with which we can use to go on an inner journey either for the purpose of opening ourselves to receiving inspiration, an inner journey of healing, of finding a certain answer or discovering something about ourselves. In some sense, every time we meditate, we are opening ourselves up to accessing these Akashic Records. We may have just not envisioned it in that way, and I'll be explaining more details about all of that soon. But first, let me introduce myself. My name is Infinity, and this is Magnetize Yourself, where we talk about life, love, spirituality, and of course, the law of attraction. The Akashic Records, although they are often illustrated as a very physical library, are actually stored all around us. It is energetic, an energetic space that always exists and is always accessible to us, in which we can uncover knowledge, information, or experiences about absolutely anything. The reason the Akashic Records are often envisioned as a literal library is because many of us, prior to fully understanding and consciously accessing the Akashic Records, are guided in some way to access them unconsciously. Personally, I have had experiences of unconsciously accessing the Akashic Records through dreams before knowing what the records actually were. I used to have dreams of being in this library with endless numbers of shelves for as far as the eye could see, shelves that were soaring high into these very high vaulted ceilings. These were the Akashic Records that I was unconsciously finding my way to or being guided to in order to receive some form of information on a subconscious level through this dream experience that my spirit guides, the universe, my higher self, whatever you want to call those divine forces, were handing to me for the purpose of some form of soul evolution. So in my memory recollection of this dream, I could still remember vividly this place, or at least what my soul within the dream interpreted as a place. Because oftentimes when we are faced with limitless amounts of knowledge and information that we can access immediately, our subconscious mind will naturally interpret that as being a library. Because where else can you go and access so many different forms of information that you feel as if you don't have within your own conscious mind? I want to know in the comments if any of you, like me, have ever had a strange dream about being in some kind of gigantic library. For me, it's almost like a faint memory because, again, it was a very unconscious dream experience, not something I did consciously. But if you have any of these memories, or if what I described struck something within you, almost like nostalgia, where you also felt as if you have dreamt about this library, let me know, because I'm really curious if I'm the only one who's had these unconscious dreams of accessing this universal library of knowledge, these Akashic Records. Like I said though, although through dreams we often conceptualize the Akashic Records as a physical library, they are actually around us in every single moment, and we don't even have to be asleep or even meditating to access some of the information in the Akashic Records. However, I am going to teach you a conscious meditation technique you can actually use to more consciously participate in accessing the specific knowledge and information you want to gather from these records, from this universal library. The reason that meditation is such an effective tool for clearly accessing knowledge from the Akashic Records, although it isn't necessary, is because as we meditate, we close off several of our senses that tend to be distracting us from accessing this metaphysical information in any moment. In a sense, being too aware of our five senses can cause us to be completely cut off from our sixth sense, that intuitive knowing within each of us that leads us directly to what we could call the Akashic Records, this web of universal invisible information that always exists around us. When we meditate, we close off some of these physical senses. At the very least, most people close their eyes to meditate, and since most of us predominantly take in sensory information through our sight, this moves us a great deal into being able to tap into that sixth sense. I've even heard a story of an inventor. I can't remember his name. If any of you know it, you can let me know. But it was an inventor who used to come up with ideas and inventions by sitting in a room with nothing in it except a desk, a chair, and a notepad. And he would close his eyes until he felt he had perfected an idea, and then he would write it down. What this inventor, this man, was doing was cutting off many of the physical senses, sight by being in an empty room as well as closing his eyes, and many of his other senses by being in a quiet room. He was cutting off his sense of hearing. And as he dulled himself to many of these senses, all of this information of our external concrete reality we are taking in, he was then able to tune into that inner genius. This isn't just an inner genius that certain people have, people you may call experts, or the rare inventors, the masterminds of a generation. In fact, this genius is within each of us. So through meditation, again, we, like this inventor, can cut off many of our external sources and tune into that, or our external senses, and tune into that sixth sense, that sense of the invisible, that part of us that is able to sense and interpret energy. If you want to access the Akashic Records through meditation, I also highly recommend not just closing your eyes, but meditating along with a subliminal. This is because, like I said, it's very important to be able to dull ourselves, to be able to cut off as many of the physical senses as possible in order to tune into that sixth sense. In my own life, I found it very difficult to meditate, to access universal information from collective consciousness, from my higher self, from the universe, to truly connect with that, until I began incorporating subliminals, because even with my eyes closed, I was all too aware of the auditory sounds around me. And subliminals are a very powerful way to not only cut off that auditory sense, but to also relax the conscious mind that is always absorbing this external information and drowning out the sixth sense with the loudness of its thoughts. If you'd like to explore my subliminals, I would recommend for accessing the Akashic Records. Specifically for this practice, I would recommend my general 7-chakra clearing subliminal to assist you in clearing away any energetic blockages, conscious spinning thoughts, or even deeply seated subconscious thoughts that may be preventing you from accessing your soul's intuition, from accessing these Akashic Records. So that subliminal will be in the pinned comment and the description box, and you can listen to it completely free for 7 days when you create a trial account on my website, Sound and Soulful. Which, by the way, thank you so much to all of you who are supporting me as a member on my subliminal site. I really see and feel and sense each and every one of you beautiful souls out there. And I'm so excited that so many of you are experiencing such positive shifts you've shared with me as a result of incorporating subliminals into your daily meditation routine. As you meditate, all you need to do to access the Akashic Records is essentially undo the locks that are on the door to these Akashic Records. In this kind of metaphor, imagine there is a locked door between you and this library of universal information, a library full of bookshelves with every piece of information you could ever desire to know. Within this library, you could imagine the Akashic Records as containing 3 types of information. The first type are your personal records. You may have heard of the Book of Life. It is very legendary and a concept that has appeared in many different cultures and times. This is a metaphorical book which contains every single thought, action, intention, experience your soul has ever had. And I say your soul because it's not limited to this lifetime, but previous lifetimes and even future ones. The entire existence of your soul is recorded into this personal record. The second form of information in the Akashic Records is related to collective consciousness. This is where any thought that has ever been thought, any experience that has ever been had, any life that has ever been lived is collectively recorded. Think of this as the history book, the ultimate history book of mankind's collective consciousness. All of our consciousnesses put together in one record. And again, this isn't just limited to the past and the present. This history book also includes the future. Although, for those of you wondering, because I see this as a natural question, if our future is set in stone, it never is, because we, through our present thoughts and actions, are always creating our own destiny in a sense. Yes, we do have certain soul callings, passions, purposes, but at the end of the day, we are always capable of updating our own Akashic records, both personally and collectively. And whenever we make these updates, we change what is being recorded in the future. So really, when we look into the future, we are just seeing potential outcomes for ourselves personally, for humanity, for collective consciousness. When you think of the Akashic Records, you must think of them as more than history books. Within the Akashic Records, within this energetic space, the past, the present, and the future all exist together simultaneously. And I'm going to give you an example of times in which you have accessed the Akashic Records or sensed information from the Akashic Records without maybe realizing what you were doing. Have you ever met a person who felt deeply familiar to you? When you met, you felt instantly fond of them. In some cases, you are accessing Akashic Records of the past with this person. Your souls are very familiar with one another because although we come into this world with spiritual amnesia, we don't often remember the specific details of our past. They are still programmed within our very DNA, our soul DNA. We can still feel the echoes of these past lives. But did you know that you can also feel the echoes from the future? So, if something or someone will bring you very positive, warm, happy outcomes or experiences in the future, you can also feel those future echoes in the present moment, even upon first seeing that place or first meeting that person. This is why sometimes when you walk into a place the first time, you can feel as though you have memories there, as if you are very fond of that place. There's a kind of warmth about it. And then you end up spending more time there and making a lot of those memories there in the future, in years to come. You could look back in retrospect and see that in that present moment when you were first entering that space, the warmth and familiarity you were feeling was an echo from the future. It was a potential outcome of the beautiful future memories and experiences you could potentially have in that space that were echoing from the future into the present. And again, it can be the same way with people. This is sometimes why we intuitively say that we get a good or a bad feeling about a certain person. Sometimes we aren't just intuitively sensing into their present mind or even their past, but we are actually sensing and feeling future experiences we are going to share with this person. It's as if our soul is speaking to us in that moment as it accesses these future memories through the Akashic Records and is telling us this person or this place is going to be important to you. Like I said, this energetic information does exist all the time. Oftentimes, people who are empathic, who are sensitive, will report that they can feel the history of an object just by picking it up. If you are someone who feels overwhelmed in places like antique stores, places with a lot of old objects, objects with a lot of history, this is because energetically you are being bombarded with the history, the historical information that is energetically being stored within those objects. In the presence of those objects, and especially if you make physical contact with them, it is as if you are yourself experiencing the echoes of everything that that object has seen, touched, and been near in the past. But again, there is so much to say because the Akashic Records are so vast. In fact, they are limitless. There is no limit to the knowledge we can access through this energetic space. And there are so many ways to illustrate it or conceptualize it. It's been one of the greatest mysteries of all cultures, religions, times, and places. But again, meditation is one of the best ways to begin accessing this information. And I will leave you with one final note, a final tip for while you are meditating for the purpose of accessing Akashic information. The reason that many people struggle to successfully access the Akashic Records is because they see it too much as a physical, tangible library space and not as a storehouse of energetic information. So what happens is they try to essentially teleport their consciousness to the Akashic Records without a purpose of retrieving some form of information. And because these records are limitless, they are filled with everything that has ever been lived, and everything that ever will be lived, and everything that is being lived right now on all levels of consciousness, the personal, the collective, and the universal. And because of this overwhelm of information, they aren't actually able to gather anything concrete, any piece of meaningful information from the records. So what I would highly recommend is having a very clear and definite purpose. Because if you come to the Akashic Records with a clear purpose and intention in mind, a piece of information you want to retrieve for a specific purpose, you will be guided to that information either consciously or even unconsciously. Once you set this intention, you may even find that you aren't able to access this information during your first meditation session, but then you are dreaming the next night, and in a dream you are given this piece of information. Leave your mind wide open to the way in which this information could be given to you. Sometimes it may be given to you in the form of you having a dream about going into a library and reading the information. But other times it may be told to you by a person in a dream or even during a meditation vision. It may just suddenly pop into your head, or it may come into your mind the second you wake up in the morning. The last step to retrieving anything from the Akashic Records is to remain very wide open to the way in which the information comes to you. Allow your mind to open to the possibility of the existence of these records and your ability to access them. And don't doubt whatever intuitive information does come through. I hope this video was an interesting and helpful introduction to the Akashic Records. And I say an introduction because although this video is already over 20 minutes long, I still feel I could talk for hours about the records. But just like I said that you need to go into the records with a specific purpose, I feel that to say any more about this, I need a specific direction or purpose. So if this topic does interest you, let me know in the comments below anything else you would be curious about as far as how to access particular things in the records or what exists there or anything else that you'd like to know. Or if you're not particularly interested in the Akashic Records, leave any kind of suggestion or comments below. I always say in this community, love is catching like wildfire. If you just look at the comments, there are so many of us beautiful souls sharing inspiration, sharing stories, sharing thoughts. I would almost go so far as to say we have the most supportive, uplifting, wonderful, soulful community here on YouTube, and I am so grateful for each and every one of you, not just for being here, listening to my thoughts and resonating with me, but for co-creating this space with me, because this isn't just me sharing information. We are truly co-creating this energetic environment here together on YouTube. So thank you for being such an important part of that. And if I do resonate with you, please subscribe to this channel. Join our community of like-minded, conscious, creative beings here on YouTube. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll talk to you again in the next podcast.